Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast, This Week in America. Doyle Smith, author of The Nature of Good Government, has degrees in economics, government, history, business, augmented with experiences in corporate editing, individual taxation, government and military experience, many other ways that people use to contribute to society. A retired CPA, he's been active in politics since he was 16. The Nature of Good Government is a revolutionary point of view that looks at our current difficulties, suggests that our government should attempt to solve problems rather than bemoan them. Doyle says the government should be a government of people, not money. The Occupy Wall Street senses this, he says, but lacks focus. His book provides that focus. He's back with us on This Week in America to talk about his book, The Nature of Good Government, Doyle Smith. Welcome to the program, Doyle. It's great to have you back with us.
Glad to be back.
There's been so much in the news, and I think of you often as we talk about some of these issues facing our government today. Let's talk about something that's received a lot of attention, especially over the past summer, and that was Black Lives Matter. How does the point of view of government relate to the whole Black Lives Matter movement? What's the interconnection there?
One of the problems we have with the Black Lives Matter is that it's easy to like somebody in general, but if you talk about the individual, you find that it's not so easy to enjoy being with them.
Yes.
I have some friends. One is a major banker with the Key Bank, Jesse Childers, who is a black, who goes to our church, goes to the church I go to, and I work with him. We have many blacks individually who have done well. But on the other hand, I have tried to work with some blacks in rehabbing a house. I hired them, and they took the toilet tank to their house because they needed one. They took they sold the appliances that I had for use in the house, and these people, unfortunately, have set the reputation in the white community for what all blacks have to deal with between
Yes.
blacks and whites. These people who are bankers, one of the persons is a very great reporter for the local paper here. These people have a reason to be really respected, honored, and worked with. But the reputation of the ones that are also black but have no idea of their responsibility to be honorable has making it hard for people to want to work with them. Black Lives Matter is a good idea. I'm going to take a moment, just if you don't mind.
Certainly.
Back in 1910, Mexico had a revolution. It had three different groups. One had no interest in what the government should do in the future. It sort of dissipated. Pancho Villa was part of that one. Then there was another group that felt that the whole government needed the right and responsibility to become a good country, but they had to deal with the United States. And you know the old saying, poor Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States. The third group was people who wanted to be left alone, but with enough land to grow the crops so they could live. And these three groups are still having a problem living together in Mexico. In New Mexico, we had a similar thing when the Spanish moved in. They insisted that the Mexicans become church members. The Mexicans didn't like it. They kicked the Spaniards out. When the Spaniards came back, they came with respect. And they now live together peaceably, three different groups with three different cultural backgrounds.
Yes.
They have found that the mutual respect is important. Now, Black Lives Matter is trying to do what the Indians did at that time and get to be accepted as people. And I think that is a great thing. But it is important that each person deal with life as an individual, not as a member of a group. And this is where the Black Lives Matter is a problem. We find that the whole group is making a big splash, but what about the individual? We have a real problem with abuse of authority. In South Carolina, North Charleston, South Carolina, a man had a policeman had a man's car. The man decided to run, and the policeman shot him in the back. There was no need for that. That was abuse of authority, and we need to stop that. And Black Lives Matter will help that. We also had one in Cincinnati, Ohio, not long ago, where the man was stopped for lacking a front license plate and ended up shot. That is far worse penalty during the arrest than it would ever have had if he'd gone to court on it.
Yes.
We can't afford to have that kind of abuse of authority. And Black Lives Matter is right that we have to make a difference, but we have to also make it a difference as individuals, not everybody trying to say that it's a common everyday thing that all blacks are this way.
H. Doyle Smith is our guest on the program, talking about his book, The Nature of Good Government. You'll find the book available at stratton-press.com in the bookstore there, the usual places. Video of this interview you'll find on a website, thisweekinamerica.us, or go to our YouTube channel and get all that information. I mentioned before, the book is The Nature of Good Government. Talk about the basic objectives that the government tries to achieve. What are those?
Here we find that the Bible has given us a very good statement of what the government's responsibility is. When Paul, in his discussion in Romans, commented that the sword was given to Caesar to punish wrongdoing. Now, punishment does no good at all if you're punishing the past. But if it keeps people from harming people in the future, that is a proper way to use it. And the government has the responsibility to prevent harm. Now, they say they punish wrongdoing. Wrongdoing is anything that causes harm to anyone or anybody. But the idea that the church determines what is to be forgiven gives us a problem. If we are trying to prevent harm, we cannot forgive the harm that is done. And the church has become an accessory to that harm. Now, there's two other objectives of the government: do together what you cannot do separately, and adjudicate disputes. Now, Christ was asked to adjudicate an argument between two sons who wanted their father's will to be judged as to who should get what. And his response was, "Who made me a judge?" And that's important to understand. No churchman should be a judge of the difficulties between people. If he wants to do his job as a Christian, he should be willing to take on and accept every person that he deals with as a person. God created us in his own image.
Yes.
And when Moses asked for his name, he told us what that image was. Whatever I am, I am. And this is what we need to look at people as. I'm 6'2". I'm old. I'm not got a lot of knowledge, but that doesn't mean that I have to tell somebody else what he should be. Each person has his own responsibility for determining how he works within the society
Yes.
without harm to other people.
H. Doyle Smith is our guest. The book is The Nature of Good Government. Boy, the time is going by so quickly, and so many items I want to talk about. You might have already answered this, but I'll ask it again. You've mentioned the church several times. What is the objective of the church?
Christ said it very clearly. Be ye perfect, even as our Father in heaven is perfect. Now, if we say that we're going to be perfect, even as our Father in heaven is perfect, we know to begin with, we're not going to accomplish it. There's a saying around that if you shoot for the stars, you might get to the moon. And it would be sin not to get to the stars. But we forgive that sin because we have gotten more done than we would have otherwise. By attempting to be perfect, we have done more for ourselves and others than we could have possibly done otherwise. Now that's different from the role of the church, which says prevent harm, or the government, which says prevent harm.
Yes.
We have to make clear that the church cannot give the government its responsibilities. We've run into that with our pro-life movement. The church has the responsibility of asking people not to have abortions. But then you turn around and try to say it's a law. That's not forgivable, and therefore we've got a problem that would be better not dealt with.
Doyle Smith's book, and H. Doyle Smith is how, if you're Googling, that's how you'll find the book, The Nature of Good Government. You'll find it at stratton-press.com in the bookstore, Amazon, the usual places. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you get a link on to get information on the book and order it there as well. What's the relationship between regulation and growth? Two words that we hear a lot about today in government and trying to do a balancing act. What's the relationship between the two?
Growth comes by allowing people to do things without restricting their ability. When we make a regulation that says that you can only have a certain type of item, where you can't make a difference, well, then all growth is stopped in that division, in that direction. Regulation limits. Growth is expand constantly. Now, when you come down to it, though, growth can go so far that it has no source of operation. So you do need some regulation, but the regulation that you have has to be to provide safety and fit in with the role of the government to prevent harm, not to stop growth.
H. Doyle Smith, our guest on the program. I said this was a revolutionary point of view. It really gets you thinking. That's why the book has received excellent reviews. Book is doing well. And again, you can order a copy at stratton-press.com in the bookstore or Amazon, the usual places. The Nature of Good Government. I'm going to throw a couple things here in talking about harm. It's something that you discuss a lot in the book, The Nature of Good Government. How does preventing harm relate to health and safety? And how can people be harmed, and how can society be harmed?
If we were to ignore the coronavirus, society would be harmed because we would have a much more need for hospitals than we can possibly exist. So we have to hold on to those things that cause the coronavirus to be less harmful to all the people. We have a recall of the airbags in many cars.
Oh, yes.
Because those airbags cause harm when they go off. We need to make sure that there is no harm in what we do. But we don't need to stop everything in a way because we feel like the growth. Now, the growth of the coronavirus has been so fast and so complete that our hospitals are overwhelmed. We are trying to control it, but we can do what we can But it's a matter that you cannot just ignore the problem.
The book is The Nature of Good Government. It's a thought-provoking book. Excellent thoughts presented by H. Doyle Smith, the author, and our guest, who's back with us on the program. Something we all have to deal with is uncertainty. Talk about how we deal with uncertainty and the role, if there is one, in government for helping us deal with that uncertainty.
If you are a Christian, you really don't have uncertainty very much. You sit back and let things go by until you find out what is going on, and then you help as much as you can. But you're not worried about the uncertainty because you know that the Lord has control of the situation. What we try to do, though, is we try to make things certain. And one of the worst mistakes that people make is to say that we want to have something set in stone. One of the commandments says, "Thou shalt not make any graven images." Graven images are things that are permanent and sit the same regardless of whether the change is going on. If we understand that all life changes and all changes are going to happen, and we need to deal with those changes as they occur, we don't try to look back at pictures of the old days and deal with the current situation as if it were the old times. Every generation develops a different point of view about life. Excuse me.
Oh, yes, yes.
And we have to acknowledge that the new generation has a different point of view. Moreover, we are in 3 stages in life. One is the stage of learning how we're going to act and getting a setup so that we can be profitable and productive. The next stage is when we are productive and we continually produce for the good of all. And the third stage is when we're no longer able to be productive and we still have to do our best to help other people.
H. Doyle Smith is our guest talking about his book, The Nature of Good Government. A couple minutes left in the program. I'm going to squeeze a couple more questions in because it's fascinating. I love having you on the program and talking about these issues, the nature of good government. Why do we need to change? Do you think we need to change? And how do we go about it?
Change will always be there. Nothing is static in this world. And our ability to adjust to change is the first thing that makes it possible for us to deal with the world as it is. Now, we used to have rotary phones. We used to have stick shift automobiles. Now, someone has said that the younger generation would be stymied completely if they had to use a stick shift and a rotary phone.
Yep.
We have a question on cursive. Well, over time, our cursive writing will still be helpful, but with the change into the computer age, we're finding that it has a less requirement than it was before. I deal in cursive easily, but that's because I've dealt with it all my life. And
Yes.
there are children in schools today that cannot write their name in cursive. They can't sign sign anything because they do not know how to write their name. And when we get voter registrations or petitions for candidates, we have to sign that petition. And sometimes that signing of the petition has to be in cursive to be assured that it is the person who says he is.
Yes. You know, it's interesting because I grew up with that as well. And when I'm using it, which is rare because, like you say, society really doesn't require it anymore. You almost have to stop and think like where you're going to go. And I'm thinking if somebody compares this signature with 5 years ago, I could be in trouble because I don't remember what I did 5 years ago. A minute or so left in the program. This question is really unfair. We need a whole half hour for this, but we're rapidly running out of time. But I do want to ask you, this is something that's really in the news. Can we allow the government to mandate compliance with any system? And this is something we debate almost on a daily basis anymore.
The problem is, do we have harm when something is happening? If there is no harm, then there should be no notice taken of it.
Okay.
If it is harmful and causes a problem, we need to stop it so that we are not causing harm, regardless of who gets harmed. Ourselves, our country, our people, our neighbor. If anybody that is harmed by what we do would be a problem that could be everybody's business. Now, harm is an interesting thing. You've got to determine what that harm is, and that's why we have laws. The law says that it's harmful to do certain things. Therefore, we have a regulation saying you will not do those things. But we need to avoid making it into law when it won't be enforced. We've had a situation of that with prohibition, when we decided that nobody would make or distribute alcohol, and of course people would not obey the law. No law is valid if it cannot be enforced and it is not being obeyed. It may sound like a law, it may be on the books as a law, but the fact that it is on the books does not make it something that people will obey. There is a law in New York City that you can't take a horse above the seventh floor of a high-rise building. Well, that is really a silly statement because nobody in his right mind is going to have a horse downtown New York unless it's a police. And to get it to the seventh floor would be a mistake. We typically find that people make laws a lot of times because they want to make a change and because they want to make a lot of things different. That does not give you enough reason to want to put it on the books that everybody obeys that law.
That is, we could talk a whole half hour about that topic. And again, that's been in the news. So if you've got a law and no enforcement, it's basically a suggestion, right? I mean, it's really, we'd like you to do this, but we're not going to make you do it because we don't have any enforcement mechanism set up to do that. This has been a fascinating conversation, as it always is, with H. Doyle Smith, our guest on the program, author of the book, The Nature of Good Government. You'll find it at stratton-press.com in the bookstore there. You'll find it all the usual places. Go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can link on to H. Doyle Smith's website information at stratton-press.com, and you'll be able to order the book and get information there, of course, as well. Doyle, it is always a pleasure to have you on the program. Time always goes by so quickly. Thank you for spending some time with us on the program today.
Well, I'm glad to be able to be there with you.
It's always fun. It's always enlightening. And things a week from now, I'll be thinking of something I talked about with Doyle going over in my mind. It makes so much sense. A revolutionary point of view, The Nature of Good Government. Book available at stratton-press.com. Of course, information on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Back on today's program after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, Associate Producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, Segment Producer. Ben Watson, Webmaster. Otto Bechet, Director of Engineering and TV Production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, Executive Producer of This Week in America.